This is the Fail Fast podcast. Stories of entrepreneurs who looked at failure in the eyes and didn't give up. With your host, the online sales master, Quinn Amorum.
Welcome back to the show, my friends. Today we have with us a guest that has been here about a year ago, and he joins us now with his second book. It is Todd Palmer, and the book is From Suck to Success, a guide to extraordinary entrepreneurship. If you missed the past episode where Todd was here, we talked about how he used to be in $600,000 in debt, and from that hole he climbed up all the way to making the Inc. 5000 list 6 times. Okay, so now the title of the book is going to make a lot of sense. From Suck to Success. And Todd, he's also the CEO. If nothing changed, Todd is the CEO of Extraordinary Advisors. Todd, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so glad to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. And let's start from something I said. You are still the CEO of Extraordinary Advisors.
Yeah, I'm still the CEO of Extraordinary Advisors. It's been a crazy ride since the last time we spoke. My coaching practice, where I work with leaders and CEOs, teaching them inside-out leadership techniques, has grown 300% since March of last year. We're recording this in February of 2021. So, in less than 12 months, I've had incredible growth in my business because I've been able to really work with leaders who are wrapped up trying to go from suck to success. And as I talk about in the book, most of that comes from within us. A lot of it comes from the leaders who are stuck in their own heads. They don't know how to communicate that through their organizations. And then the organizations become stuck. And how do we get them unstuck? And I teach a process of active, the active learning cycle to get any leaders unstuck around any problem they're facing as soon as we can anchor them in their purpose and passion. And so it's by using that model, I've literally been blessed to work with leaders from around the globe. I've spoken from virtual stages from the United States to Mexico to over in Europe to Malaysia, Australia, all these places that I've never been to. And at least I can, check them off my virtual bucket list, but haven't been there in person yet. And I took the opportunity during these tough times to double down and finish my book. And last week it was announced as an Amazon #1 international bestseller. So it's been an interesting 12 months since we've last seen each other.
No kidding. That is incredible. So congrats on the 300% growth. That is fantastic. Congrats on launching that new book. And let me tell you something. That lemon on the cover, it is genius.
Thank you.
Because I'm going to tell you something. Before I looked at the cover and I saw on the email I had from you that the name of the book, I read it wrong. I read From Stuck to Success. When I saw the lemon there, I'm like, oh my, it is From Suck to Success. And okay, so I got it. It's like embrace the suck.
Yeah.
And
so it's interesting. I've got some friends of mine who were in the military, and Embrace the Suck actually was from a conversation I had with them. And then I have another friend of mine who's really big into, positive mindsets. And so how do you take lemons and make them into lemonade? And then another friend of mine is very deep in nutrition, said, so it's kind of like if you were back in the 1500s and you're coming across the ocean from Europe to America and you're on a ship and you get scurvy, they're going to give you a lemon for the vitamin C. So those are all suck to success stories. And I thought, the great thing about the cover is anybody can interpret it any way that best suits them. And then that makes me feel like they'll take more ownership in the process.
Nice. Okay. So I wasn't the only one that liked it. And apparently a lot of people did because it made the list of the bestsellers on Amazon. How long did that take?
It's an interesting process. And I've never done it before as an author, where it's called an Amazon pre-sale marketing campaign. Mm-hmm. And you try to get as many books sold in certain categories over about an 8-hour period. It's just to say I fully understand it, I would not be telling your audience or you the truth. But what I do know is it required a lot of work. Sold several hundred books in about an 8-hour period. Wow. To people in my network, people in my community, clients, family members. My son bought a book. My clients bought a book. My brother out in California, his whole family bought books. And then the generosity of strangers. I had several people who I've never met, interacted with, saw the book out there. They saw it trending, like, hey, I'm going to go buy that. It's just been the craziest thing. I actually got a letter or an email yesterday from a guy who's out in the Boston area, and he goes, I got a preview copy of your book from my brother. Loved it. Would you mind sending me an autographed business card? I'm a collector. And I just was like, wow. I said to my family, I said, I got like a fan letter. How cool is that?
Oh man, that is so exciting. And you know what? Uh, I received, I don't call it fan letter because I don't know if I have fans, but I've received emails and thank you messages through Instagram and LinkedIn from
Mm,
people that hear this podcast and the other podcast that I have with commerce entrepreneurs, and with nice things, right?
sure.
And how I have helped them, and without even knowing it. It's so amazing that the ripple effect, that little things that we do that can help somebody else. And
Well,
you know,
I've got a quick story for that theme because in my book I talk about a thing called an IKIGAI, which is this multi-layered approach to look at what your purpose and passion in life is. But if you want to really break it down simply, when people like you and I we're operating our sphere of genius, and I'm not using the genius because I think I'm some super smart guy, but it's our zone of where we should be. And I worked with Simon Sinek a dozen years ago, and he helped me figure out over 2 years 2 words, and those 2 words are improve lives. So if I'm improving lives, that comes through not only from an auditory perspective for a listener or a visual perspective from somebody watching, but people actually feel that sincerity from folks like you and myself who are really showing up in the world playing full on, being vulnerable, maybe telling I know I've told some stories that are I think are kind of embarrassing, but those are the stories like, I don't get so the guy, he wrote to me, he didn't say like, hey, I really think it's cool that you had, you're on the Inc. 5,000 6 times, or he's like, when you talked about your worst day of your life, that landed with me. And I could put myself in your shoes on that curb after firing your entire company, bawling your eyes out, because that took me to the moment. Like you're real. You're not some pie in the sky Instagram person who puts out there, hey, buy my book and you can get a yacht and some bikini girls or some studly guys. No, he's like, you're just a real person. And that reality, just like I know with you doing, that's what lands with people. It's that going back to your ikigai, your why, your authentic self. That's, I think, so important. And I think during these times of disconnection within the COVID backlash, people need that more than ever.
definitely do. There's been so many people affected, and of course some more than others.
Sure.
And I think everybody has been affected, right? There are some businesses that have actually been affected in a positive way. Like, for example, you mentioned you have the 300% growth.
Sure.
My e-commerce businesses have been growing tremendously.
That's awesome.
Because people, for the longest time, they couldn't or didn't want to go out and buy their things. So they would go and buy more from Amazon and Walmart.com. And of course, whoever the seller is going to grow. But there's so many sad stories, unfortunately.
There are.
As somebody that has, I know you had a huge experience in consulting and helping others. Have you heard some of these horror stories that people were affected by?
Well, I have heard some stories, and it's been so powerful for me. As a coach, it's a powerful piece to be in. My job is I am the guide of my clients. I call them the hero's journey. So, check out literature, check out movies. There's usually the character who's struggling to make decisions or struggling to get from point A to point B. And then there's that sage, that guide over them who's pointing things out. They'll go back to Star Wars. You got Luke Skywalker, you got Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda. You've got Frodo in Lord of the Rings series who's got Gandalf. So we all need someone to be the guide of our hero's journey. And as a coach, I get that blessing. And I found that the best way for entrepreneurs who have really struggled, who've really suffered, is to adopt a mindset. And this is probably going to, freak a couple of people out listening, but I'll explain it. Adopt the mindset that whatever this tragedy has happened for me, not to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use myself as the example. In March of last year, I was supposed to be on 6 different stages in 3 different countries speaking, talking about what I do as a coach, teaching from stage, eliciting conversation, creating that connection in the room. And these were prepaid gigs. I was going to be flying all over the globe. My family was excited to see me get out the door. Lots of good things were happening. And boom, within 2 weeks, they were all gone, all canceled through no fault of my own. Just like a restaurateur whose restaurant may have been shut down through no fault of their own. What we can do then is we can make the choice that, yes, this is my brutal reality. I talk about it in my book, The Stockdale Paradox. This is my brutal reality. I'm going to find a way to make this brutal reality the defining moment of my life, or the defining moment of my week, or the defining moment of my year. We can do a lot with that. So I decided that I could take my why, which is improving lives, and I can apply that to people at the grocery store. I can apply it to, I talk to high schools for free. I've talked to entrepreneur groups for free to help them get unstuck around that. I did a program where I talked to 42 CEOs in 67 days, all for free, to improve their lives. One, I had the time. Two, I had those prepaid gigs, so I had cash coming in the door, so I wasn't going to be out on the street. And what I found was an immense sense of appreciation and gratitude from those communities. Now I pivoted forward, and I'm working with a restaurateur out in the West Coast, and he had a high-end restaurant. It was shut down. He was having some struggles with he had a business partner, and he was the front office in this, and he had a background in culinary, and his back office person was his chef partner, and they were in chaos and crisis. They were not getting along. Then COVID hit, and they decided to break up the business. And what he decided he was going to do was, he always loved the high-end pizza market. So he decided to open a pizza place, because they had two locations. So one partner got one location, the other partner got the other location, which they thought would be less desirable because it was smaller, which during a pandemic is great because then you have less real estate expense. Didn't really have a lot of staff, which is perfect if you're going to open a pizza business. And he created these customized pizza programs where he was creating essentially date nights at home. Last time I talked to him, he was going to do over about a 9 to 12 month period, anywhere between $4 and $5 million in pizza sales. Talk about seizing an opportunity within the tragedy. So my point of the story, whether it's mine or this other person's story, is if we look for those opportunities within those tragedies and we decide that something's happening for us, not to us, we can make some difficult decisions in a much more healthier way.
I love that concept. Things are happening for you, not to you, because a lot of people think the world is against me.
Yes.
And
yes, they do.
And that is a terrible way to live, right? And when you think, like you just said, it's happening for you. I think it was Tony Robbins that said that often the worst thing that ever happened to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I was $600,000 in debt. I didn't tell people for years. It is literally the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Mm-hmm. Now, I talk about it pretty much every day, often multiple times a day. You never would think that your mess becomes your message, but you're absolutely right. The tough times we go through can really help shift us, change us, and move us into places we've never even thought were going to be possible for us.
Exactly. And sometimes, or most of the times, I would risk saying that the pivots that come from there are better than the original idea. And it's something that you hadn't thought of before, like in this case, the pizza place. I'm guessing that there's so many other stories out there. A lot of the software that we know that came from Silicon Valley wasn't originally designed to be what they are today.
Right.
They were pivots.
It's so important. I love that you pointed that out. When I deal with entrepreneurs who are trying to, I call it my E4 process, where I try to get them to recognize what's not working for them, to pivot into intention, not expectation, and then put a strategy to that intention, and then create massive action around that. I always refer back to the software guys. Software guys will have no problem. It's just called failing forward, right? They'll put out a software with a couple of missing pieces or a couple of bugs in it, and then they'll put another. I get an app on my phone, boom, it'll pop up. Hey, you need to do an update. Finally, told the client, said, you know what an update is? Here's what an update is. It's something that didn't work, which means it failed, and now you got an update, so now it's going to work. So why can't you do that in your construction company, in your restaurant retail business, in your service-based business? It's a universal application.
That is 100% true. A lot of people do not read when they do an update on their phone or an update on Instagram or Facebook. They don't read what they're updating. They just click the button and update it. But the reality is 9 out of 10 updates are repairs on something that was broken. And only one is an added feature, right? It added something new.
Yes, exactly.
But people only notice the features because it's something different. We're like, oh, right. Facebook changed. And I don't like change. That's something that normally happens.
Right.
But yeah, you are absolutely right. So now on your book, From Suck to Success, the first half of the book are collections of concepts and stories, right? And most of those are 2020 stories of
a lot of again, going back to tragedy turning into an opportunity, I told a lot of stories in the book about dealing with entrepreneurs who were dealing with COVID. I also pulled people in from my tribe. I didn't want to just tell my story or tell the story of maybe I certainly tell the story of people you have heard of, like Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken has a piece in there. But I also brought in real people that, Brian Scudamore of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I know Brian, he volunteered to be in the book. I brought in some of my clients, like Tom Schwab from Interview Valet came in and contributed. Brought in Deb Gabor to talk about branding. I even brought in my brother. My brother Greg contributed a couple of pieces to the book because, believe it or not, my brother was my first coach. And people are like, oh, well, he's your coach, he's your brother. Of course that makes sense that, he'd want to help you. Okay, I'm telling you and your audience, I paid my brother. And here's why I paid my brother. There were many months I paid my brother as my coach before I paid myself, because I knew that if I didn't feel enough pain, and if I wasn't investing in myself, in my turnaround, and I wasn't paying the people who were helping me the most, that I wasn't going to take the advice seriously. I learned that from a friend of mine who's an actor. And when we were in school together back in the, early 90s, I'm in Michigan and he's in New York City. And we had this long conversation because I want to come out and hang out for a weekend. Like, who doesn't want to go to New York City for a weekend? That'd be pretty cool. But he says, yeah, you're welcome to come out. You can sleep on my couch, but I haven't got time to hang out. I said, oh, wow, did you get an acting gig? He's like, no, I'm waiting tables. I said, well, just take a weekend off. He's like, you don't understand. I'm waiting tables so I can pay my rent and pay for my acting lessons. He goes, and I'm not going to let anybody interrupt my dreams. Because I'm telling you, there are many months I pay for my acting lessons before I pay for my rent because it's an investment in myself. And he blew me away. So I'm 52 years old. He's been a working actor since we were in our 20s because he invested in himself. Just like when I had to turn my business around, I had to hire a coach. I had to invest in myself to get the help I needed. Just like I work with my clients now. They're like, well, I can go to a free service instead of using you as a coach. I'm like, absolutely. You get what you pay for. Not sure many coaches have had the rocky roads that I've had, because I'm going to walk that journey with you. But you certainly have to do what feels right to you. But I always challenge them, whomever they engage with, make sure you see any coaching and relationship as an investment, not an expense.
That is beautiful advice. And I believe in it now, and I wasn't always like this. There was a point where I thought, and that's when I was losing, by the way, coincidentally, that I thought nobody needs a coach. And coincidentally, that was the time where I was losing the most. And something had to happen. Again, the worst thing that happens to you becomes sometimes the best.
Sure.
And it changes the way you see the world. And then you ended up realizing that the only idiot is actually you, right? So that was a correction that I did. And so learning is now one of my favorite things, constantly.
Sure.
And
well, you know what? The great thing about it I found is like I call it being a lifelong learner. And when we're lifelong learners, what happens for us is not just business, but life becomes our curriculum. Life becomes our classroom. And I've had clients, during this pandemic, for example, that have grown and scaled their business beyond their wildest dreams because of things they learned during the tough times. I've had other clients who've decided to take inventory on their lives. As a CEO, as an entrepreneur, wherever you go, there you are. So there's work-life integration. It's never work-life balance. And I've had clients of mine who've checked into 12-step programs, to rehab, to get themselves unstuck internally, because they've realized not only is the bottleneck in their business the CEO themselves, but they've also realized the bottleneck in their marriages or the bottleneck with their kids is themselves. And they realize they need to go out and get help. So it's been such a transformative time, but they couldn't do that if they weren't willing to be lifelong learners, be self-accountable, realize it's inside out leadership to get them where they want to go.
Wow. It's like we're in symphony here, because I was told this once at the time where those things were happening, and business was failing, relationships were failing, and several of them. And I was asked once, so can you find a common denominator in everything?
Yeah.
And it was me, right?
Yeah.
So basically, when things are happening and they're happening for you, just remember that they're happening for you. They're also happening for a reason, and right. A lot of the times you are that reason. So
there's a model out there of therapy. It's called Imago. For anybody listening, it's spelled IMAGO. It's by a guy named Harville Hendricks, and it comes from a book called Getting the Love You Want. And his premise, which I believe in, is we actually bring people into our lives to help us heal, and we bring them in because part of the healing process is how they make us crazy, and how we make them crazy. And how, when we realize that and recognize it, and there's a whole process they put people through, but it's powerful because I see the transformation, and the transformation doesn't come in my relationship with my partner. My transformation, your transformation, anyone's transformation is going to come in their relationship with themselves, then how they show up back with that partner. and how they exhibit different kindness. Because that partner, just like, and think about it like this too. Everybody who works with us and for us in our organizations also bring who they are to the office. And a lot of people wear masks and they'll show, but the reality is sometimes the people who drive us crazy are sometimes the people we need the most.
True enough. So, although things are going well for you right now, are there some business frustrations, things that you have to deal with that are, like the biggest frustration of today?
Oh, my biggest frustration really is that interesting point I've reached with my coaching practice and with the book coming out is, how do I manage my time and my energy effectively to create the greatest impact, and how many lives can I improve? So I'm looking at different programs such as, beyond individual coaching, which I love. And my intention is to do it for the rest of my life because that's where I get my greatest satisfaction. I've been recently contacted by some startup entrepreneurs or some solopreneurs who maybe for whatever reasons, aren't in a position to afford a coach. Well, what else can I do for them? So I just had a call with someone about putting my book on audio. In the process of putting it on audio, maybe there's a way we can take some of the book and put it into teaching modules. And then I can get, 5 or 10 people into a mastermind group to then have them do some self-coaching. I can appear, once a month or once a week or whatever the number is going to be to serve a greater group and to create a bigger community. And it's really the challenge is there's only, I can only sell my time once. There's only one of me to go around. And as the business has grown and mushroomed, I don't like telling people no. I think it goes back to being an old salesperson. We all love the word yes. But beyond that, I just see so many people who are in need. And if I can give something to them, like for example, anybody who's listening today, go to my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com, or my website, the book from my website, from suck to success.com. And I'll give you a free chapter of my book. And I think it's the best chapter in the book because it kind of lays out the entire book, and it's certainly designed to whet your appetite. But if it's all anybody got, and it's their only interaction with me ever, and they got value out of that, then the story I tell myself is I'm living my purpose, my IKIGAI, my why of improving lives. So for me, to just to kind of summarize your question is, there's only so much of me to go around. I'm trying to figure out how can I maximize that to make the greatest impact.
Cool. Now, here's something that I just thought of, and I've never asked anybody this before, but if there is the best self of Todd Palmer, are you close enough to catching up with him?
That's a great question. And it's so interesting that you've never asked that, but one of my favorite bands is a band called the Foo Fighters. I love Dave Grohl. Like I liked him in Nirvana, but I really loved him in his solo work. And he has a song called The Best of You. And he just chants over, are people getting the best of you, the best of you, the best of you? And I was actually listening to that at the gym this morning. So your timing is serendipitous.
Nice.
And for me, I feel that at this stage of my career, I believe that by being a servant leader to others and helping them on their hero's journey, you are getting the best of me. And by being a servant leader in my family, they're getting the best of me. And a lot of it comes down to dealing with my internal itty bitty shitty committee. Because if I can manage my reactivity, I can manage my imposter syndrome and my negative self-talk, because we all still have it. Yeah. And I can show up more present, be a better active listener, allow people the safe space to be vulnerable, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's clients, and then help them reach points of self-acknowledgement, self-awareness, and self-breakthroughs. I can't think of a worthwhile thing for me to do with my time. And I'm a blessed guy. I get to go do a lot of cool things. But when I'm in those moments with my leaders, and that's what I do love about Zoom is I can see that light bulb go off. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've been working on that problem for 8 years. And I've been blaming the external world for that problem for 8 years. Oh my gosh, it's me. And now I have the power. I'm empowered. How do I, and we just get on a session of self-discovery. Honestly, I can't think of better work I could be doing.
Nice. So this is what you do right now is your favorite of what you do.
Oh, so I was a good recruiter, but it was never my passion. I think I was a decent CEO, but I had a lot to learn, and I was better in my last day versus my first day. But I used to teach college. And when I was teaching college, I loved that work because of the learning that other people received in the room. They're learning from the community within the classroom. They're learning from me in the self-expression, the safe space we created. I think so much today, but I think it's been around for a long time, but specifically for today, so much what people want from our communities, our leaders, is to be seen and to be heard. And when I can help someone feel like they're seen and they're heard, then they can relax and they can access parts of their brain that are creative, not reactive, and they can have breakthrough moments. I mean, I've had it with CEOs from guys in people in their 60s and 70s, and I had it last week with a kid who's 11. It's the most satisfying work I can do. So I appreciate the question so much.
Oh, and I just thought of something that it just happened yesterday too. And we've been now for the last couple of weeks teaching our kids about being grateful. And
yeah,
I have one is 7, but I have 2 of my kids they're both 3-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit harder for them even to know what that means. And yesterday we were at the table, and it was funny because we asked them again, so what are things that you are grateful for? And normally you expect the kids, like, you're grateful for a toy or grateful for a candy, or right?
Right. Well, because they're kids, right? Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so they started saying the nicest things, and nothing was about possessions or toys or candy. It was about feelings and having mommy and daddy. And of course, then it was grateful for something that she wanted, that didn't have yet. Of course, that was going to come up. But it is, like you mentioned, you were talking to somebody that was 11 years old, and age doesn't matter much for these days. I think it was different a long time ago. I don't know if we were all thinking the same like machines back then, or if what happened.
So I have a theory on that. So again, I love the interview. Having such a good time. I love the question. So think about it from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When we are, in the industrial age or the farming age in the United States, for example, we're very much wrapped up in the very baseline issues of fight or flight, safety first aid. Take it back to the days of being chased by the dinosaurs. Listen, I don't want self-actualization. I just want to be able to live till tomorrow. And if you look back less than 100 years ago, we've increased our lifespan by a significant factor. So now we've got a whole lot more. We're doing a whole lot less with our hands. We have more free time, more disposable time, which allows us for reflection. So there's that piece. So I think first it's socioeconomic. I think a second piece to your question, why kids are, the gift we can give them as adults is, check out the work by Sean Aker. Sean Aker is a gratitude expert. And Aker talks about, if you want to be happier and you've got depression issues and you've got sadness in your life, certainly look and see what's contributing to that. But you want to start pivoting that immediately. Start expressing gratitude for what you do have. Start expressing gratitude to the other people. And he shows this scan of a brain about how our brain will fire differently and release different chemicals when we express gratitude to other people. And so I remember during when COVID hit, I started just going through my phone and my Rolodex and started reaching out to people. And I got engaged with people I hadn't talked to in a couple of years. That was my fault. I could have been a better friend. So let's fix that. Let's correct that. And I had some really powerful conversations with people who were just so appreciative of my expression of gratitude that it changed their days. So if you can teach it, we can teach our kids that when we express gratitude for others, gratitude for the small things, gratitude for the big things, we're actually rewiring and changing our brains, and we're also changing the relationships in our community. And that's, for me, there's nothing more valuable.
Todd, I just thought of something that is kind of a funny story, but I did something similar to you, and I started reaching out to a lot of people that I hadn't spoken with in a long time, and try to have like some sort of contact to, keep the relationship going and stuff. And funny enough, one of my friends that I hadn't spoken with in a long time, I got a hold of him, and he said, "Well, it's been a long time since we spoke. I hope you didn't join the MLM."
Yeah, well, you get those friends, you get those calls, and it's I think we as a society, and I certainly fall in this category at times. We get lazy. We tell ourselves how busy we are, but where our awareness goes, our energy flows. I learned that from a gentleman by the name of Dan DePani. He's a monk. And he taught us that if we focus our energy on things that matter to us, we will take action towards them. And when we are not having to rush around, and when we are potentially homebound, it gives us a chance to take a breath, and it gives us a chance to reach out to people that are important to us. And when the world is shut down and our ability to be busy is reduced, I think it's a chance to really for me at least, it was a chance to take inventory of what matters most. And there's a great book out there by a good friend of mine, Nigel Bennett, and the name of the book is called "Taking a Leap for What Matters the Most." And he talks about, and he tells the stories how he was traveling the world and he was not watching his kids grow up. And he hires this coach, Kevin Lawrence. And he and Kevin had set out a 10-year plan for Nigel. By year 8, he had completely stopped working in the day-to-day operations of his business. His business was actually growing magically. The entrepreneur was the bottleneck. There's no surprise. And he took a year-plus trip with his family around the globe, with everybody having nothing more than a backpack. And last time I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, he brought that story up, and he talked about how in today's world where travel is completely restricted, he's so grateful that he has these memories with his now adult children that he never would have had before. So really, it does come down to doubling down on what matters the most.
That makes perfect sense. So you mentioned the finding your why earlier, and I've heard many people that say their why is their family, is their kids, and that's why they're into businesses, so they can make enough money to have the freedom to spend that time with their kids.
Right.
The reality is, when they do because they don't set an actual goal, when they do get busier, that freedom is not spent with their kids that are there already, right? So they have a why, they just forget it because there's no, I guess they didn't turn on the GPS to know when they arrive.
Well, yeah, for sure. Well, you know what I always tell my clients, hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a plan. And if we really think if we're doing this hard work for our family to get us, then let's have a plan, and let's share that plan with our family. Let's have a family meeting. Let's get everybody together, from the youngest to the oldest to the significant others, and talk about what we're going to do and how it's going to roll out. What I've often found, and this can be painful, is a lot of entrepreneurs will put out there, I'm doing all this for my family, doing all this for my friends, I'm doing all this for my community. And the reality is they're doing it all for themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's those tough conversations, because as a coach, I'll say to them, cool, you're doing all this for your family. Tell me define what success for your family looks like. Well, we'll go on a trip. Cool. So you're going to spend 10 days in Hawaii. Great. That sounds awesome. Then what? Well, that's it. I said, okay, so really you're really just doing this to get a trip. I mean, the reality is money is nothing more than an instrument to create freedom and flexibility, because we have diminishing resources. We have diminishing resources of our personal internal energy and diminishing resources of our time. Every day we live, we're closer to the end than to the beginning. And how do we work through that? And getting these leaders to understand that you're kidding yourselves, and your family knows this, that you're not doing it for them, that you're doing it for you. So let's just call it what it is. And let's dig down why you're doing it for you. Let's go really into that basement of why. And that is some of the most transformative experiences I've ever been through, when I hear, I'm doing it because I grew up poor, and my parents got a divorce because they always fought about money. And I don't want my kids to go through that, because I go, well, then let's go a layer deeper. How did that make you feel when your parents got divorced? I felt abandoned. I felt unimportant. I felt lonely. Okay, so are you saying that if you don't make enough money, you're going to let your family know that could be your worst reality? And they just look at me like, oh my God, that's exactly what's right. It's that fear of being alone. It's that fear of letting other people down. It's that fear of not being enough. It's that fear of being abandoned. Once we get there, then we can do the work. And that work could still result in going on trips with your family, but know why you're doing what you're doing. Know that you're dealing with an internal pain, and you're trying to feed it with external forces, external trips, external toys and gadgets. Know that. Realize that has a shelf life, and it typically doesn't work for most people. Rock stars can be rock stars for only so long, and eventually they got to start living the regular life. Same with entrepreneurs. Once they have those breakthroughs, I kid you not, I've seen marriages heal. I've seen families reconnect. And I even talk about it in my book, how the beginning of my book is how I reconnected with my son. So I've lived it. And it's important, I think, for people to recognize that often what we think is a surface issue, we've got to go deeper to really get to the root cause.
You have some fantastic points. So I cannot wait for everybody that is listening, that is as excited as I am, to know more about you in the book. And they can also have your first book. Remind me of the name of the first one.
Yeah, the first book is called The Job Search Process. It's also available on Amazon. And it's a book that teaches people how to find a job in 6 weeks or less. And typically it was very popular with kids just getting out of high school or college looking for their first jobs. It's been interesting during the pandemic, as unfortunately people have been displaced. There's actually been a spike in sales because a lot of more people need to figure out how to go find a job, and they weren't looking to go find a job. And then my second book, From Suck to Success, is really designed, and the title talks about a guide to extraordinary entrepreneurship, and I think it is. But beyond that, it's really more of a guide to create an extraordinary life. And I open the book by talking about reclaiming the word extraordinary. Extraordinary is a singular word. You and I could talk about what extraordinary means to us, and we're going to have different answers, but they're both right because they're singular. So what an extraordinary life looks like to you may be different than what an extraordinary life looks like to me. For me, an extraordinary life is doing what I want, where I want, with whom I want, as often as I want to go do it. Sometimes it's taking my family, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's going to play baseball in Arizona. Sometimes it's going for a walk in the snow, with my family. And sometimes it's being with my clients. But as long as that it's under my definition of what an extraordinary life looks like, it allows for so much more creativity versus an extraordinary life at one point for me was only having a $20 million company, and that was miserable.
So extraordinary life not only changes from person to person, but even with the same person, it changes from one day to the other one, or 1 hour to the other one.
Yeah. Well, and it can, as long as we know what like for me, I want to improve lives. Well, I couldn't go speak from stage. I can do it on Zoom. I can't do it. The craziest thing is, I moved to a new neighborhood about 3 years ago. I didn't know any of my neighbors. You think you should go to be neighborly, right? Well, they're busy and I'm busy. We wave at the mailbox. Well, when you can't go see anybody else, we created these little block parties. I got to know my neighbors. That was great. It was part of my extraordinary journey. I got to know a guy who lives next to me. Come to find out, he's a retired mountain climber. He's been on Kilimanjaro and he tried Everest. I'm like, dude, you are badass. He's like, no, you can go stand in front of 300 people and have a conversation. Yeah, you're badass. And that mutual respect, it was just so much freaking fun. But I just decided that doing what I want, where I want, with whom I want, as often as I want to do it, and improving lives for me is the definition of extraordinary life.
There you go. And you just reminded me of something that we missed out on this summer because of COVID. And it is the neighborhood block parties, because we used to do the same thing here. And it's fantastic to know, like, the person that lives across from you for a few years that you didn't even know that much about them, and you have so much in common. For sure. Todd, before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find out more about you and where they can find the books. We already talked that they are available on Amazon, but I bet you have it somewhere else available too. Yeah, just come to my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com. I'm giving away a free chapter, as I mentioned earlier. Just put in your email and we'll ship it off to you via email and you'll get it right away. For anybody who's interested actually in having a conversation with me to help them improve their lives or to help them figure out what their why is, I'm offering 30 minutes free, no charge. I'm happy to talk to anybody around the globe. I've talked to people who are solopreneurs. I've talked to people who are CEOs of Fortune 100 companies. What it allows me to do is it feeds my improving lives mindset. And also is a chance for me to pay back the coaches who've helped me on my journey, because they were always generous with their time to me. And if I can have one, I talked to one young lady one time who, was struggling with life, and she had, was living in her car, and we put together a plan and a strategy to get her to a new place in life. And I heard from her the other day, and she's moving along. And that is just, again, people want to be seen, people want to be heard. And if I can help anybody in any of those areas, please reach out, Todd at extraordinaryadvisors.com. Please mention you heard me on the show today, and I'm happy to make the time for you. That is amazing. Todd, thank you so much for your time. It's always extraordinary listening to you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I had to use that word, and it is true. I love talking to you, Todd. So thank you so much. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for subscribing to Fail Fast Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review and visit failfastpodcast.com for show notes, Quinn's social media, or even to tell us your story.